my pick at the moment before I see them in fight week.
This is Jonathan Aguilar, fifth Pro Boxing Fans, joined by Gareth A Davies. Gareth, back from Paris, back from the Paralympics. How was it?
No, it was very interesting. It was my 8th time that I've been to the Paralympics, Jonathan, and going way back when you were in short shorts at primary school, I think. It was very interesting. It always is. It's highly intriguing, amazing human beings. It really just shows what human beings are capable of, people at the forefront of their own physicality, which weirdly, that's what our sport is, fight sports. The guys and girls are fighting at the forefront of their own physicality, putting themselves to the test. So I've always said this, that the spirits of the Paralympians does match the way a lot of fighters are. Fighters are often fighting for many, many different reasons, and they're not dissimilar to some of the Paralympians. So it's always inspiring. There's always loads of amazing human interest stories, and GB were brilliant, second on the medal table, 49 gold medals. We've got a very, very strong Paralympic setup. It was really, really, really interesting. Paris is a beautiful place as well, so it was very enjoyable having my margarita, a little bit of tequila in the evening with a meal after work, and the Parisian culture of sitting out on the street. I think they produced an amazing games and an amazing Olympic Games. Been a big, busy summer with those big events, with the Euros and with the 2 events in also in Germany and in France. So feels like the boxing season's about to kick off now in a big way. In many ways, some people have said it's been quite quiet, but I've been busy with a bit of MMA as well, and traveling to that Riyadh season event in Los Angeles. So it's been quite a busy summer for me.
Obviously, this week we've got Canelo Alvarez, Edgar Berlanga. Now, were you as shocked as, I guess, me, everyone else watching last night, seeing Eddie Hearn, Leonard Ellerbe so cool with each other? Like, after everything that's happened, what did you make of that bit, first of all?
Not really, because I have watched the video. I don't know if everyone got them together. I watched Colin McGuigan's interview with them, which he made light-heartedly about them, kind of having a beef. But the truth is that beef often exists on social media. There's trolling. It's people light a fire under it. People very often say things from a distance that they never say to each other's faces as well. I thought Eddie Hearn dumbed himself down a little bit in that interview as well, and said, "Look, he's quite self-effacing, wasn't he, with Leonard there? I've known Leonard years and years. He's great to operate with. He gives very little away. He's a very shrewd man. Obviously, for years and years and years, he was Mayweather's guy, and that's how we all knew him. Very smooth operator. Almost sounds like a song, that, doesn't it? Yes, I think they've all realised that they need to work together. And weirdly, as he said a few years ago, they sat down together, Leonard and Eddie, and they were talking about a type of 5v5. Arguably, when he first went over there to America, with DAZN, what is now 6 years ago, I believe. So I wasn't shocked, but they, from afar, on social media, which is maybe where people have their road rage these days, but when they get out of their car, it's a little bit different. I think, they will fall out again. I mean, weirdly, Eddie reserved his criticism for Oscar in that interview and said, well, I don't know why Oscar hugs me. He's not my favourite person, all of that. But good to see them together, and good to see them working together. And they want to now. So I wasn't surprised, bottom line with this, wasn't surprised, because Tank Davis is Leonard Ellerbe, Al Heyman, Amazon Prime there. Shakur Stevenson is now with Eddie. And that's a fight that he needs to make for Shakur. We know he's fighting Cordina on October the 12th. October the 12th, yep. Isn't it? In Riyadh. So he needs that relationship with him because he needs to get that big fight over the line. I think he touched on it in that interview as well. So I'm glad I watched it before it came on.
I guess that's a positive though, isn't it? Seeing them together because Leonard's, pretty highly involved at PBC and Eddie over the years haven't had a great relationship with them. But the fact that they're talking and seem to be getting on all right, I guess that's a positive for seeing a Tank Shakur fight, right?
Well, exactly that. I mean, I think it's um, I do think we're going to get that fight, but it's going to take a bit of working, a bit of machination, because it's one of the biggest fights out there outside the heavyweight blockbusters. That is, and you've got Canelo and potentially winner of Bivol or Beterbiev, or Canelo and David Benavidez outside that, and the big heavyweight fights, obviously. That is certainly in America, that's the biggest fight. Pure American fight. Those two have come up together. They've been in and out of each other's milieus. They've been their milieu. They've been leading towards something for a while. Tank's the favoured guy at the moment by most people, but given what he's produced in the last 12 to 18 months, and Shakur needs to prove something to lots of people. Hopefully he can do that against Joe Cordina, but hopefully Joe Cordina can produce something amazing as well. And I think that's a good fight for Shakur stylistically, because Joe will bring it. Because Shakur has flattered to deceive in the last few fights. I don't mind him being a purist boxer and going to the office and winning easily, but at the moment, most people I think would favour Tank Davis in that fight. So they need to build the resonance of that contest, because it really is a blockbuster. And they could have 2 or 3 fights if it's a great first fight.
Yeah, absolutely. On Canelo this week, like a lot of people have been saying, even Canelo himself, he basically saying he can at this point in his career fight anyone he wants. Obviously, fighting Berlanga this weekend. Do you agree with that? Do you think like a fighter can get to a point where they can fight who they want, or do you think they should still be fighting the guys that fans want to see? No disrespect to Berlanga, but a lot of people would prefer to probably see the Benavidez fight.
Of course, but no disrespect to Canelo, even though what we're going to say is he's a modern great. I think he's 16 to 1 on favourite to win on Saturday night. I've just done a small preview for in terms of voices predicting for the LA Times, for example, for Manuka Kopian, who's gathering many people's opinions on it. And unless Canelo has one of his worst nights ever and Berlanga has his best purple patch ever, you can't see Berlanga winning this fight. It's a very similar fight to Jaime Munguia. I think Canelo owns his opponents now, kind of physically and psychologically on stage, maybe even metaphysically, that they don't believe they can beat him. And yet the only ones who do will be a Bivol, a Beterbiev, and a David Benavidez. And that people have talked about David Morrell as well. But he didn't look that good on the Los Angeles card 5 weeks ago. But I think I was looking at Canelo's career the other day, and that for me there are 4 major fights, and he's lost 3 of them in my view. 4 legacy fights he's had in his career. The first 2 Golovkin, the Mayweather fight when he was 23 and Mayweather was 10 or 11 years older, in which he put up a sterling performance, but he was up against an artist at that point, and just didn't have enough wherewithal and knowledge of the big occasion and the big fight, and he was up against Mayweather. I thought the 2 fights with Golovkin were amazing. The first 2 fights. The third one, Golovkin was very old and he won easily. But the first fight, I think he lost against Golovkin, and I think he pipped the second fight and won it. And then the fight against Bivol was a legacy fight as well, an incredible fight. You can throw the Kovalev fight as well, but Kovalev was way past his best at that point. I think Canelo's had 4 amazing fights, 2 wins, 2 losses on paper in those 4 fights, and I think he's lost 3 of them. And the reason why I say all this, I know there's all the Cotto fights and the Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, all these other fights. I'm picking those because Golovkin's a modern great. Bivol is going to go on to be a modern great in my view, and Canelo's a modern great, and Mayweather is. They all they all inhabit a very high ladder, a very high shelf in the pantheon of great boxers. And I think for him to finish his career and not have two big fights, which I think if Bivol beats Beterbiev in October in Riyadh season, it would not surprise me to see Canelo fight Bivol again. And maybe then finish his career with a fight with David Benavidez. They're two very difficult fights, but those are the fights I'd get really excited about. And just to cap off on that, I've said a lot there, but I think it makes sense, doesn't it, what I'm saying? That if you pick his career apart, he is a modern great. He fights with regularity. He's got a massive following. He's extraordinarily popular. He's been amazing for the sport. We tend to, I don't, but one tends to overlook them when they've been great for a long time, and people take them for granted. But he does need to fight the best because he wanted to do that in his career. And the truth is, we're not all over there this week, are we? Well, I know we've got the big event here in London next week, but we ordinarily in the past we'd have all been over there for Canelo fight, but it's a kind of feels like a foregone conclusion that he's going to win. I think he wins on points or by late stoppage.
Yeah. Gareth, obviously next week, as you mentioned, AJ against Dubois. Do you think this Riyadh season event's going to top the last one in LA?
Oh yeah, in a big way. It's a phenomenal card. The video that they made for it with all the fighters as zombies looks extraordinary, and all the little offcuts that the fighters have put out themselves, where they've clearly enjoyed themselves. I saw an interview with Hamza Shiraz earlier today where he was talking about, God, I had to actually sing Sweet Caroline in front of the crew and into this mic, into a recording mic. And it was worse than having to box. Him swinging off the bar. And they look like what I think one of the points I'd like to make is that they seem to really enjoy the build-up when they've got to go and do that. Because it's more meaningful. There's a legacy there with the videos that have been made. This one, obviously, by Guy Ritchie. With carcasses hanging in a butcher's or in a butcher's warehouse. Fantastic, creative imagination. Our sport is very, very creative. Really excited about next week. I think there's so much on the line. I mean, you asked me questions, you picked my mind on it because overall, I'm really looking forward to it. I've just kind of worked out my schedule of what I'm going to do next week. Obviously, I'm there every day from Monday. It's a great card. I'm looking forward to every single fight on the card.
Yeah, I think, is it fair to say, like, the fans win next week? Like, the British fans have been asking for a big fight night, and next week we've got it.
Yeah, I think, you've got to look at the critique that His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh and the Saudi Arabians had at the beginning, that, they're stealing our sport and there's no atmosphere and all those things. Allow them to breathe and put things together. As you know, when you're over there yourself, you're party to more things, to briefings. I've been very lucky to be on the inside for a long time in boxing, and you do hear what's going on and you can see the overall picture. And no matter what you say, people are critical of, they think you're siding with them, but there's a plan. There's a plan that they want to put into operation, and this is a part of it. I just had a meeting just now, and with some people I'm working with next week, and they were saying, "Do you think this will be a one-off in the UK?" I don't think it will at all. And if Fury beats Usyk in December, and Joshua defeats Daniel Dubois next week, I think they'll sign them for 2 fights. I think we'll get one here and one in Riyadh. I think they're looking at that picture. We've seen enough of Turki Al-Sheikh now to know that he listens to the fans. I think this will go a long way in terms of allowing people to see that they're going to do a few events in America through the year and a few events in the UK. They'll go all over the world because they'll go where the markets are, because you need to do that. So that's interesting. I think the fans will enjoy it. That license for 96,000, you've been at Wembley for some of these big fights. It's an extraordinary atmosphere. It's a giant cavernous edifice And even the BMO Stadium in Los Angeles with 25,000, 27,000 in there, that felt enormous as well. It's going to be a huge crowd, 4 times the crowd almost. It's going to be amazing. And we are going to get 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., all the way up to 11 p.m., all decent fights, all very good fights, and better than decent, all very good fights that have all got intrigue about them.
On the main event, a lot of the build-up's been based around what happened in this sparring session that they had years ago. Obviously, Anthony Fowler came out this week and to TalkSport, and he said that Dubois hurt Joshua in that. What have you heard, over the years, and is it relevant to next week or not?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's always muscle memory for those things. We do hear that it didn't go well that day for Anthony Joshua in sparring with Dubois. Then they're not putting the absolute details out there. It remains in sparring. It's just sparring as well. And Daniel Dubois had nothing to lose, and Joshua was still developing at that stage. I think there's talk of it being like 4 or 5 years ago anyway.
Seven,
7 years ago. Sorry, 7 years ago. And exactly 7 years ago. So Joshua was going through, a period when he was still discovering things about himself. He's a very different boxer to what he was 7 years ago. He's almost, I know he's going for a 3-time heavyweight champion of the world, but he's almost like the 3rd iteration of himself as well, which is quite interesting. So it'll be in the mind a little bit. It's a bit like that external pressure that everyone's putting on him to defeat Daniel Dubois so that the Tyson Fury fight will happen. That won't be on his mind right now. He's got a very dangerous young critter in front of him as far as he sees it, in 26-year-old Daniel Dubois, who's looked very good of late, as has Joshua, by the way. And you've got to praise the sterling work behind the scenes from Don Charles with Dubois and Ben Davison and Lee Wiley with Anthony Joshua. They've transformed the way they are, certainly in the optics of the way they're fighting and how they're carrying themselves, and transferring those skills into the delivery of what they should be doing in the ring. My only critique of Daniel Dubois in recent times is he got hit a bit too much by Filip Hrgović, which I don't think he can afford to do against Joshua. And I see it as a battle of the jabs early on, because they both like to jab and throw their right hand or throw a left hook in the case of Joshua. They both hook well as well. But I think it'll be cagey for a couple of rounds. And then I just think the fight's going to explode. I cannot see it going 12 rounds.
You think it'll go early?
It could go early. It could go mid-rounds. I mean, I could be completely wrong, and it could go 12 rounds. You never know with these things. They both could get up off the floor and fight on, but they've both got a lot of power. Joshua's a very good finisher. Dubois looked like he was hit too much by Hrgović, and they will protect his chin more in this fight. And then there's always some question marks about, this is heavyweight boxing, so there are always question marks about your chin in heavyweight boxing, but there's question marks about Joshua's chin if he's hit flush by Dubois. That right hand of his is enormously dangerous. But both men come into this contest with great confidence. They got even though Ben Davison's only, I think he's 29, 30, he's still been around the game a long time. The strategies have always been good for his fighters. He's a very astute tactician and technician and strategist. As I say, with Lee Wiley, they pick the opponents apart. If I was to just put a kind of casual view on it, my view is Joshua has a tighter defense, and I think arguably people might not agree with me, but a better jab. And I think Dubois is easier to hit, and he commits himself a little more. So I think if I was to say anything, my pick at the moment before I see them in fight week is Joshua to land a bit more, and Joshua to win the fight 6, 7, 8 rounds into it.
Well, it's fascinating, and I think fight week's going to be very interesting, especially after the face-off. Seeing them sort of come head to head is going to be interesting to see if anything else like that happens. Do you think anything's going to kick off next week?
Oh yeah, I think it's going to be a very emotion-ridden, tense week. You've got the row between Joshua Buatsi and Willie Hutchinson. Joshua Buatsi wouldn't even look at the clips, would he? of Willie Hutchinson when they've been over it. Josh Warrington is going to give everything against Anthony Kakachi. They're both going to throw their hands in that fight. Looking forward to Josh Kelly up against Liam Smith at middleweight. That's a challenge for him. What's Liam got left? What can Josh do at middleweight? Tyler Denny and Hamza Sheeraz. Who can write off Tyler Denny with what he's produced? But what a great star potentially we've got in the making in Hamza Sheeraz. What fights have I forgotten now? Padley and Chamberlain, they'll deliver, they'll throw their hands down. There's one other fight, I think. How can I forget?
You think you named all of them, actually?
No, I named all, but you know,
yeah.
I mean, how can you not enjoy all those fights? They're all going to deliver something.
Yeah.
And then we've got some nice home events for a couple of weeks. We've got Riyadh season again, October the 12th, which is going to be amazing. Better be Evan Bivol, Cordina and Shakur Stevenson we've talked about, and a great undercard again, Wardley and Clark. I mean, we're very blessed right now to be involved in all these great events. It's going to be a big one next week.
Yeah, can't wait, Gareth. Appreciate your time. I'll see you next week. And yeah, have a good weekend, mate.
Cheers.